All right, welcome back to part 2 of the Unit 5 review. The width of a poster board is 25 inches. Using scissors, you reduce the width of the poster board to 5 inches. What is the scale factor of the dilation? All right, so we know we're going to have to use the numbers 25 and 5. And here's what I like to think about before I even put them in the place. If I start at 25 and I go down to 5, I am getting smaller. And when you deal with dilations, anything greater than 1 makes it get bigger. And if you want to, if you have a scale factor of 3, you're making it 3 times bigger. A scale factor of 5 is 5 times bigger. A scale factor of 2.3 is 2.3 times bigger. Anything greater than 1 is going to make it bigger. Anything between 0 and 1, so if there's a number in between 0 and 1, that makes it smaller. And so if you have a scale factor of 1/2, you're going to be making it half of its size. You're going to get smaller. If you have a scale factor of 1/3, you're going to make it 1/3 of its size. It's getting smaller. In order to make it smaller, you do not look for a negative number. That flips it. That actually doesn't make it smaller. So when you deal with scale factors, anything greater than 1 makes it bigger. Anything between 0 and 1 makes it smaller. So because I'm getting smaller in this case, I know that when I set up my ratio, I need to make sure if I set it up as a fraction that it needs to be between 0 and 1. What I mean by that, if I did 25 over 5, this would reduce to 5 over 1. That would make it 5 times bigger. I don't want to get bigger. So I'm going to flip that and I'm going to do 5 over 25. And this just reduces to 1/5. And that's exactly what I want. I want it to be 1/5 of its size. So when I go over here to match up the ratio, I want to make sure I use the one that's 1 to 5 or 1/5. Using a scale factor of 1 inch to 15 feet, what are the blueprint dimensions of a building that is 60 feet by 80 feet? All right, well, since I know it's 1 inch to 15 feet, I'm going to go ahead and write that down as my first fraction. And then I'm going to solve for this one first, the length or the width. So I know I have 60 feet. Since feet's on the bottom of my fraction, I'm going to put 60 on the bottom. And then I don't know what's going to be in inches yet. So this is how I'm going to cross multiply. I'm going to do 1 times 60 equals 15 times x. Draw your line, box off your letter. 1 times 60 is 60. And then I need to get rid of the multiplying by 15. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I divide each side by 15. And x equals 4. That's not my final answer though. That's just the dimension for this one. So that's going to be 4 inches. And now let's go and figure out what the 80 feet would become. So I'm going back to my original scale factor and I'm going to set that up first. So 1 over 15. And this time I know that my feet is 80, but I still don't know my inches. And then we cross multiply. 1 times 80 is 80. 15 times x is 15x. Divide each side by 15. And of course I use a calculator. You can probably hear it in the background. That gives me 5.33 repeating, or 5 1/3. So you can write that a couple different ways. You can write it as 5.3 repeating. You can write it as 5 1/3, or you could round it off as 5.33. Oh, and those are inches, by the way. So those would be my new dimensions. 4 inches by 5 1/3 inches. The scale of a map is 1 inch to 21 miles. How many actual miles does 3.6 inch represent? All right, so let's set up our first fraction. We have 1 inch over 21 miles. And then when I set up my second fraction, we're given the inches. So we're going to put that on top where the inches are. And then we don't know the miles, so we're going to let that be x or m or however you want to set it up. And then we cross multiply. 1 times x is 1x. 21 times 3.6, let's see, I'm using my calculator. That is 75.6. And usually we solve for x. This one's kind of already solved, but if you want to go ahead and go through the steps, you would divide each side by 1. And so it is 75.6 miles. Determine the scale factor for the dilation from triangle B to A. The order is important here. So if we go from B to A, we need to first recognize that we are getting smaller. And remember, if you are getting smaller, you need to make sure that your scale factor is between 0 and 1. All right, so if we look at this, I'm just going to use one of the side lengths. I'm going to use this side length. It doesn't really matter which one, but this will be an easy one to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That side length is 5 units long. And then I'm going to find the corresponding side, which is this one. And I'm going to count, and that would be 2. And then from here, a lot of people get confused. Oh my goodness, is it 5 over 2 or is it 2 over 5? I can't remember. You don't have to memorize the formula. You just have to remember that if you're getting smaller, it has to be between 0 and 1. If you did 5 divided by 2, this actually equals 2.5. We are not getting 2.5 times bigger. We're getting smaller. And if you did 2 divided by 5, that tells you that it's 0.4. This is the one that is going to make it smaller. It's going to become 2/5 of its original size. If 7 pints of juice is $2.25, how many pints of juice will you get for $9? Let's just set up our fraction. And it doesn't really matter how we set up the first one. I'm just going to do 7 pints on top and $2.25 for the dollars on the bottom. And that means when I do my second fraction, I need to make sure that I do dollar amount on the bottom and pints on top. So my dollar amount is 9, and my pints, we don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out, so you can just let it be X. And then you cross multiply. 7 times 9 equals 2.25 times X. And then now we're solving an equation. 7 times 9 is 63. And we're trying to get X by itself. Since we're multiplying by 2.25, the opposite of that is to divide by 2.25. And that gives us 28. So if we have $9, we can actually get 28 pints. Ming was planning a trip to Western Samoa. Wow. Before going, she did some research and learned that the exchange rate is 6 tala for $2.50. How many tala would she get if she exchanged $50? All right, so let's go ahead and set up the first fraction. So I'm going to do 6, and I'm going to do the talas on top, and then I'm going to do 250, because I'm going to do the money on bottom. Or they're all money, but I'm going to use the US dollars on bottom. And then when I set up my second fraction, I just need to make sure I put things in the right spot. We don't know how many tala, so we don't know the top number, but we do know $50 will go on the bottom. And then we cross multiply. 6 times 50 equals 250 times X. 6 times 50 is 300. Since we're trying to get that X by itself and we're multiplying by 250, the opposite is to divide by 250. And of course, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Oops, and so we get 120. Let me double check and make sure that that's in my calculator correct. Yes, okay, 120. So if she exchanged $50, she would get 120 tala. All right, Gabriella bought 3 cantaloupes for $7. How many cantaloupes can Shayna buy if she has $14? Which proportion can be used to solve this equation? Okay, so first we can just set up our first fraction. We know we have 3 cantaloupes for $7. And then whenever we set up the second fraction, we need to just make sure it matches. So we need cantaloupes on top, which we don't know how many, and then we need dollars on bottom, which is 14. Now you can set this up, this is how I would set it up, but you can also set it up a different way. Remember the first fraction, it doesn't matter how you write it. So you could have written the first fraction as 7 over 3. As long as when you did the second fraction, you matched up the dollars and the cantaloupe. So there's a couple different ways you could write it. You just got to make sure the corresponding parts match. for this one. Identify the false statement about the equation below. Okay, so we see an equal sign in the middle. That between two fractions, that almost always triggers my brain to cross multiply. So I would probably do that first. I would cross multiply, and I would say 12 times 20 equals 15 times 16. And I'm just going to go ahead and see what that equals. 12 times 20 is 240. 15 times 16 is also 240. So I know that they're proportional. You could also just reduce your fractions. 12 divided by 15 is 0.8. And 16 divided by 20 is also 0.8. So let's see what our answer choices say. This is a proportion because the cross products equal 240. That is true, and we're looking for a false answer. This is a proportion because when simplified, both fractions are equal. That's true, they're both equal. This is a proportion because both sides equal 0.8 in decimal form. That's true. This is a proportion because the cross products both equal 96. That is not true. They did not equal 96 when we cross multiplied. It equaled 240. All right, y'all. Good luck on your Unit 5 test retake.